Interviews from the Farm 10, 0 Point, and Other Points. April 19th, 2009. Interviews with Bernard Pullman. April 19th, 09. This is the real shit. That is the real implications of what is going on and why it works the way it does. Look at the fascinating nature of God, divinity. I mean, how many names does God have? Did you? I didn't have time to check. Many, nah. It doesn't matter. Names. All of that, nature of God, divinity, centering around a single principle. The principle of some form of creator. The very nature of the design of, and the implication of the design of divinity, enlightenment, a higher path, heaven and earth equals the very design of it with having a single Godhead, a single point everybody is going to, has a fascinating effect. It caused what you would see in geometry, the pyramid structure, where you have the eye at the top, representing the single point of creation, which everybody screams about and say, that's the elite, and so on. Obviously, that's the elite, because God is the elite. I mean, God is the point according to the design. But if you really look at the design and the way it works in consciousness equals, it is not a pyramid. It is a hive consciousness we're dealing with. Everyone in existence are part of a hive consciousness, because you're all connected to each other, see the same things, experience the same reality. So whether you are here in the physical, or whether you die and go into the afterlife, you are experiencing what everyone else is experiencing, and that is happening automatically. You don't even know how it happens, why it is possible that you can actually perceive what others can perceive, that you are using a system that is designed by what functions around only 5 senses of which the eyes are a pair of. One of it, the senses, has 2 eyes, but one of the senses through which you take in the information, your ears take in information, and so on. And that all of that has got a similar assimilation point. That means you can understand it, and somebody else can understand it. Now, imagine the design of this took a long time. One do not consider this, but have a look. Where you are now as a human, and that process they call evolution, but it's evolution, took a long time. It didn't just happen. There wasn't just consciousness. Consciousness was designed and developed, and it is related to the 5 senses and the mind, and specifically how energy is created within and as the mind. Now, within this, it exists as a pyramid from a certain perspectives, but actually a hive, because it is circling. And you as a being, or within a group of beings that has a particular belief, are on the side of the hive here, making your way up to the ultimate point, which is this that's there at the top, to become the elite, the ascended ones, the special ones, the masters equals. That desire is very deep, the savior of those that do not understand. Because you do understand better, your knowledge is more. You are better in seeing, you are better in understanding equals that whole thing exists in every human being, and that dishonesty is vast. I mean, if you look at a person like Mark, is like amazing, because he's gone through a process. I've watched beings in the 1980s going through the whole process of, I'm going to give up everything, and now I'm going to change the world. I'm going to make an impact. It's the end of the world. I'm going to do that right thing. I'm going to live correctly. And then he's all alone, and there's nobody responding. And then, obviously, it goes into the other point of absolute separation, because in a way, without one actually admitting it, you're really bloody angry, because you're all alone and nobody is supporting you. No one is considering what you have experienced. No one is considering that you have actually come to a fascinating answer, that everything you've done was a bloody mindfuck, and that everything you're doing is a bloody mindfuck, and nobody can hear you. So, you're all alone. So therefore, you are pretty angry, and especially angry at anything that may present an answer, because as far as you're concerned, there is no answer, and you start to submit and accept and the current design rules of this reality, which is, for instance, duality, polarity, balance. All the various laws, which is actually only laws of the mind system. They are not the actual laws of this reality. The mind system. Now you have to obviously go back and understand that. If you look at the history of man, that the earth wasn't always like this. The earth has only fairly recent become what it is now, and it is still busy coming forth with new stuff from the earth that you see in animals, and you see that in the viruses and bacteria, and as things communicate and come up with new points. It is actually just an outflow of the attempt of man to come up with an answer in its particular nature of wanting to win, wanting to be the best, wanting to be the one that's the savior, wanting to be the one that knows it all, equals in fact, that very statement of wanting it means you don't know the answer. And the very fact that you're not actually understanding what is going on also obviously means that there is simply no real understanding. So, what is really going on? Let's start. Look at this cone. This cone, if you put a L in there, the cone becomes a clone. So, we're all clones of the same consciousness, but you are not the same beings. This was brilliantly designed and brilliantly put together over a long period of time, slowly but surely building the principle of submission. And that principle of submission was done through the principle of its opposite, which is permission. How was it done? That you end up within cycles of experiences, where you will end up accepting your experience as reality? Now, this was done through a process of information that was layered in time, and in that time was created as what you have it now within consciousness. Remember, what time within consciousness is your minutes, your seconds, your hours, your weeks, your months equals it is your evolution. It is how you are growing in your apparent, better understanding of what is it that you want to be. It's not what is here. You're not interested in that. You're interested in becoming better because what you experience yourself as here, as who you are, you're not satisfied with. There are those that obviously experience themselves as satisfied because, remember, the design of this cone is fascinating. It creates two cones. The two cones is with head-to-head, and the point of that is, if you really look at those cones, it creates an infinity design, which the point formed within / between the two cones' heads / tips touching, is your 0 point. There's your 0 point, indicating to the point formed within / between the two cones' heads / tips touching, the 0 point being death. So, what happens at death is fascinating. For a single moment at death, you understanding everything you can imagine and everything that's ever happened. You'll know it all. But it only lasts for that single moment. Because you are moving in a polarity design, and the polarity design is not on Earth. It is between heaven and earth. Why was it necessary? That's the fascinating thing. Have a look at the nature of what is existing on Earth, and understand that this nature that is existing on Earth is actually our nature. What is the nature of nature? Nature, whether it's a plant, or an animal, or a virus, or a bacteria, it requires to feed on something. It does not exist by itself. It needs to eat. What do we do? What do we have to do? We need to eat. Now, somewhere this what we are needing to eat is coming from. It is a belief that we are apparently requiring something called energy to exist, because that, for energy that we believe we need, is not what is really going on equals we look for it, energy, outside ourselves, specifically as we have become what we are now. Basically a consumer of everything. We have done it in our money systems, in our cultural systems, in our marriages, within sexuality, within bringing forth children, within what we deal with, nature, automatically the total nature. That exist as what? A consumption system. This is not the first time or the first planet we are doing this with. We've been doing this throughout the universe. We have been consuming the living reality, the actuality of matter, to quench our absolute hunger for ourselves, which we have designed and believed to be energy. And we are looking now for the point of apparent free energy, and the belief is that that is at 0 point. I mean, at 0 point, all that exists at 0 point is the point where all the information comes together. It looks very big and vast, but that's all it is. Because the total design of the system is actually a pulley system that runs through an X, a cross, where it reverses between heaven and earth. So, if you look at the words heaven and earth, of heaven and earth that would describe this effectively, you'll see, I come to earth to live, which is live. So, when I die, I reverse my life and I become evil. I become actually evil in death. Why? Because how is it possible for God to exist? For God to exist, it requires of everyone to give all their attention to God. Unless that happens, God cannot exist, because have a look. If everybody is giving attention to each other equally, have a look. Equality exists, no God possible. So everybody had to be fooled into something. or a way that they would actually believe that a God exists so that they can give their full attention to it. The best tool for doing that was energy, because with energy you are actually binding the being to his own need for energy to survive according to his perception of his reality, and according to that, you can contain him to the particular point, the obsession of gaining energy, gaining food, which is actually the obsession, the fear of death, the fear of not surviving. All those fears became the primary driving force of this reality, of all realities, up to now, which is the all-consuming fear of need to consume, to exist. And we are living that out perfectly now. Obviously, in designing all of this, not all things are considered, and therefore, eventually you have to move on. Like even the reptilians, once they were finished with Mars, they had to move from Mars because Mars was no longer viable. If you look at the histories in the Sumerian tablets, you will see the references very specifically to Mars, for instance, as a place where resources were found. And have a look. What do we do with Earth? We mine the Earth for resources. Where's our primary energy coming from? Food. The food comes from plants and animals, and that comes from the soil. So the soil becomes diminished. Then we have to put things in there again so that we have a chemical consistency from which we produce food. Our oil is one of our resources. Our water is one of our resources here. But these are limited because the system within which we are existing is limited, and therefore as the population in the world has been increasing, we are ending up in a precarious position where our water is so contaminated that, silently, if you look back 20 years, you didn't buy bottled water. It was silently introduced as an acceptable thing to start buying bottled water. Nobody can remember exactly when that happened. In the past, your tap water used to be clear and efficient and acceptable. And then silently, water was introduced in bottles, and you could not trust the water from the ground anymore, or the water that came through your taps, or the organizations that is supposedly representing you to provide you with, which you are paying taxes for, to provide you with water that is drinkable. Slowly but surely, you simply started accepting all the changes as improvements. We have obviously now quite serious problems in our water supply, and we have. You must remember, what is evolution? Evolution is the coming together of chemicals, because everything that exists here are chemically in nature. It has a design, a nature. It's the coming together of designs that form relationships, and within those relationships, forms a relationship of action/reaction like in a polarity, and they act accordingly. So, if you have a bacteria or a virus that interacts and share their DNA information, they will come to a conclusion within that. What is the best way for them to exist and survive, and how can they most effectively consume? Now, obviously, what are the best sources of food on this planet? Is the human being. There we have a new bacteria that is flesh-eating, that is waterborne, and that lives already in our oceans and in our rivers and is already eating. And obviously is not only going to eat the human, it's going to eat the animal as well. It's become what? Flesh-eating. But we're also flesh-eating, so why should we worry about it? What you do you must get back, isn't it? That's the whole point of law of balance, because that's how polarities balance. That's why, when you are dying, for a single moment you see everything, and then you continue on your journey of energy in the afterlife. Now, what was fascinating is, in the afterlife, a control system was placed in. That control system was called the soul. What was the point of the soul? What was realized is, if God is to be God, and everybody is always agreeing and supporting and honoring God and assisting God and feeding God with energy equals every being in existence would need one purpose, a soul purpose. Okay, so how to do that was to create this soul construct which gives everybody, which is what you do with systems. When you design something, you give it a purpose to get and design everyone according to a single purpose and with a desire to have a purpose. So how was that done? That was done simplistically through the whole point of creating physicality. What was the point of physicality? Physicality, what was really needed to be mined on the earth was energy. Understand. Gold represents energy. That was the goal. The misrepresentation was to create a point to look for like. If you look at sales, it's brilliantly how people are trapped into buying things, because when you're doing a presentation, this is used very effectively in religion to trap people into hypnotic states of belief, is to create a point to watch for. So what did they do? They created For instance, a point to watch for in the prophets. For instance, Jesus is the point to watch for. Everybody looks at Jesus, while it's all about God actually, because Jesus is God's Son. So now you are trapped into the whole principle of giving all your labor, all your energy to God, while you are tending to Jesus, because Jesus is your Savior. You move into a future projection of time, and everything you do is changed into energy. So you are born as a child, innocent, without programming, but in your base design that you got from your parents. First 7 years you are taught language, culture, behavior, personality. All those things were not part of you. You were programmed that you can't remember exactly when you started speaking, when you started walking, when you started crawling, or how you did it. It came because of a fascinating thing. You see it, you copy, you imitate. You're a parrot. A human is a parrot. That's why what had to be designed was the perfect parrot system, where you present to the human what you want him to be, like through television or so on, and they will parrot it, and they will become it, and you can create your perfect control system. But what is more fascinating was that every single human being was then infused with a nuclear reactor, a mind system, a system that would take the physicality, which is the earth energy that is compacted into form, because the earth was unconditional offering this, itself up, into a system, into a construct that will through the process of emotion and feeling and sexuality and orgasmic expression and anger, all the hectic energetic expressions, cause a form of fusion. Have you ever wondered where all the energy go through /to that you are experiencing? For instance, if you suddenly have an anger outburst, you have it, and I mean, the energy goes away after a while, isn't it? Where does it go? Ever wondered? Or, I mean, all this energy that you have during your orgasmic experience, you're masturbating, and whoa. I mean, there's this energy, and then it's gone. It is not back in your body, you can check. Where did it go? Nobody noticed, I mean. Who cares? I'm satisfied. This is a consumption existence. You are not aware at all of anything you're doing. You're not aware of what you're participating in at all. You can go and have a look. For instance, when you fall in love, that energy sparks that happen, that you direct to somebody, and then the relationship falls apart eventually. But there was all this energy. Where did it go to? It was consumed. Yes, part of it you have consumed. The rest was fascinatingly channeled to heaven. Heaven could not exist without energy. So, when the chaps that designed the system realized that they could do this, and all they had to do was get everybody to believe what they're doing is their sole purpose, and that they can actually get everybody to believe that, which you have. If you have to take a look at this world, you are believing whatever you've been presented within this world. I mean, you believe the education system, the history system, you believe the news, you believe everything. You believe even that you are actually existing as who you're existing as. It's the perfect con as consciousness, and you don't question it. You're not even aware what happens to your energy. There is no self-honesty in your relationship with your physicality, because you are not in your physical body. You are contained within a mind system in the body, and you are mining the body for energy. That's why you grow old, and you eventually die, because what happens? The body dies. There is no more energy to mine. It's finished. It's all gone. Okay, and what's left, which is obviously not all of it, goes to the earth. What happens to you is fascinating. In that process, they found a fascinating key. You change in energetic nature. As you come into the world, as you're born, and through reincarnation this has been made quite an art, that when you are, if you look at the whole principle of consciousness being a donut, because if you look at this, two cones on top of each other, the two cones on top of each other wherein the tips of the two cones touch/connect, and it flows in, and it flows in, and flows in. It actually creates a circle, but that passage there, the point formed between / within the two tips touching/connecting, which some would call a stargate, a 0 point, and any point. You are in this is a singularity. Wonderful words, but I mean they are all bullshit. It actually creates a donut. And when you are enlightened, what is on top of your head? A halo. This is how the halo is created. Once you are totally submissive, and totally accepting the system, you become a master of those that has not yet accepted it, and you get